Brit helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, historically, a role for cities has been to provide sanctuary for those looking for a better life. Recently, the term sanctuary city has taken on a new, edgier, and more political meaning that now has some city governments at odds with the White House. We'll examine what the commotion's all about. We'll also look at population figures that show a decline. And with another session of the legislature near, we will discuss proposed reforms in tax codes and the prison system. Our Future Watch segment looks at the concept of air rights and why some people fear it. We'll also discuss what once was the city of Carrollton and a surviving historic building that was sold this week. In our house are tonight's Informed Sources: Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources; Tyler Bridges, political reporter, The New Orleans Advocate; Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter; and Jeff Adelson, reporter, The New Orleans Advocate. And we're going to go over to Jeff first to talk about this sanctuary city issue. And New Orleans was placed on a list released by the Trump administration about the past week or so, sort of listing it among, 33 cities that they don't feel really comply with ICE enough. And
It was actually about 100 cities that in one way or another, the Trump administration views as being uncooperative with federal immigration authorities, ICE. Most of the focus of the list was on what are called ICE detainers, which are requests from immigration authorities to hold individuals, usually individuals who are in jail on another charge, so that they can begin immigration proceedings against them.
So what is the city doing that displeases the White House?
Well, the city, so it gets a little complicated. The city, because there's two agencies involved here. There's the city itself and NOPD, and then the sheriff's office, which runs the jail. Now, both of those are considered uncooperative by the Trump administration, and there's slightly different policies for each of them. For New Orleans, NOPD will not ask immigration status for virtually anyone they come in contact with, whether it's suspects, victims, witnesses, any of those categories. That's something that the Trump administration is sort of hoping local governments will do more of as part of what the president has pledged to do in terms of deporting illegal immigrants and cracking down on immigration violations. Well,
the city and other cities too say that they're not there to enforce federal regulations,
right,
and do federal enforcement, law enforcement.
Right. I mean, there's a whole federal agency that deals with immigration. Obviously, there's Trump has pledged to increase their numbers by about 10,000 in the coming years. So what the city says is, number one, it's bad policy for us to be trying to enforce immigration laws. We need to be able to have trust in the community. We need people to be comfortable coming to us with, as witnesses, as victims, without fearing that we're going to get them deported. But beyond just policy, they say it's not our job. NOPD has we've got a high murder rate. We've got lots of other crime going on. NOPD is understaffed as it is. They say we can't go out there and be enforcing a whole different agency set of
also, NOPD is under a federal consent decree.
That's the other aspect.
So New Orleans has joined in a suit, which was filed by Santa Clara County?
Santa Clara County.
And what's that all about now?
So Santa Clara County. So the real crux of why cities are so worried about the Trump administration is that the Trump administration has pledged to pull all federal funding from cities that are labeled as sanctuaries, that don't comply with federal immigration law. So that could mean tens and tens of thousands of dollars of funding loss for New Orleans.
Millions.
Tens of millions, excuse me. Tens of millions of dollars in funding lost by New Orleans and many other cities. So what this lawsuit is trying to do is get an injunction to keep the administration from moving forward. Now, the administration hasn't moved forward yet on that threat, but the lawsuit would prevent it from happening.
Can you give us the definition of a sanctuary city, even though our Homeland Security Director, federal, cannot?
I don't know that there is any established definition. It's a term that sort of began with conservative pundits and activists who just wanted a label to put on places that weren't cooperating with immigration authorities. There's no real standard definition, and that's a point that.
Is it one of those you know it when you see it kind of things?
I like what you had in your article about it, where the Homeland Security Director, John Kelly, is that his name, said, I don't have a clue as to what is a sanctuary city, so okay.
The natural constituency for cities is immigrants. I mean, cities built immigrants. They've always been homes for immigrants, and so they're going to naturally be supportive and sympathetic.
Well, that's very true.
And cities tend to be more left of center.
Okay, well, we'll see how this one plays out. And right now, though, we're going to go over to Tyler and preparing for a legislative special session where tax reform is going to be a big issue. The governor last week sort of gave us an idea of what he would like to see happen to corporate tax structure, but there's more, which you have been looking into. So why don't you tell us about it?
Right. So the 60-day regular session starts on April the 10th, and what the legislature does, taxes can be a subject that people kind of glaze their eyes over, but really the decisions will affect every single one of us and all of our viewers as well. Right. What we know at this point is that the governor wants to replace the corporate tax system, which is a tax on profits, and he wants to replace it with a tax on sales, modeled on what the state of Ohio does. And I did an interview with the head of the Chamber of Commerce, or not the head of the Chamber, but a guy at the Chamber of Commerce in Ohio said, we've learned to live with it. There clearly are some of our members who do not like it. And some that do, because the ones that will not like this plan are companies would have to pay taxes even if they don't make money. So that's one component, is on the corporate tax side. One thing we are not going to see is that the governor is not going to suggest changes to the individual income tax system, which is what the task force that spent all last year looking at the tax system. They recommended a bunch of changes on individual income taxes. The governor said there's no support in the legislature for that, so I'm just going to put forth this corporate tax plan, which was also not part of the recommendations by this task force. And then on the sales tax side, Louisiana has not only the highest sales tax rate in the country, but also the worst, most complicated sales tax system. And the governor's going to at least try to address the high rate. The extra penny that was put on in sales taxes last year, it's due to expire next year. The governor wants that to expire, but that's a lot of money that would be lost. And so it's almost $1 billion. And so the governor is proposing to begin taxing a bunch of services, particularly that are done in Texas, that are not taxed today, like your cable TV, going to a concert. If you download stuff from the internet for software, that would be undergo sales tax in return for that extra penny going off. And the governor's going to issue all of his exact recommendations on Monday in Baton Rouge.
When you talk about the state having one of the highest sales tax rates in the country.
No, the highest.
Highest, okay. And that combines local and state.
Local and state, yeah.
It's also fair to mention that the state has one of the lowest property tax rates in the country too. So that's always been the great trade-off in Louisiana.
Right, yeah. A lot of times people look to Texas as a model, but Texas has very high property taxes. And as you pointed out, Louisiana traditionally has had low property taxes, and that was enshrined in the 1974 Constitution. So how do local governments make up that revenue for their services? Is they have high local sales taxes, and then the state has its own sales taxes, again, that add up to 10 cents on the dollar. And again, that's the highest rate in the country. The governor wants to take off one of those pennies, the one that's due to expire next year. How do you make up that money? And no one has come up with, some people will say, well, they need to cut spending, they need to cut waste. Well, no one has come up with a credible plan that would cut, over $1 billion in spending. There's just too many programs that people want. And people love to say, well, cut spending. Well, and then somebody will suggest,
not my program.
Yeah, but not my program. But then the problem at the same time is people say, well, raise Errol's taxes, but not mine.
I'll be damned.
So, but whatever the governor does propose, what kind of chance will it have in a legislature full of Republicans, he being the Democratic governor?
Yeah, the key are the House Republicans, because the Senate, which is Republican under John Alaria, that works in a very bipartisan fashion, works with the governor. The House is more conservative, more independent. One of the things that I'm particularly looking to see was whether the House Republican leadership will come up with their own plan, or they simply will be saying no to the governor. Yeah. But it's going to be a tough sell with the House Republicans, because the governor is going to need 70 votes for most of what he wants to do in the House. That's 2/3 vote, and that's a very high bar.
Is there any sense of the Republican caucus at this point, or?
We just know that a certain number of them don't want more taxes. They want no more spending.
Okay, well, it's going to be a tough session, one that I'm sure you'll be keeping watch on for us. Okay, Tyler, thanks a lot. Over to Dawn right now. Okay, we're talking air rights now, but not only air rights, there's some ground rights, because stoops are involved with this issue.
This is not air rights like for an airplane to travel over your home. This is air rights, your stoop, your balcony, your awning that extends off of your building and across city property lines. It happens most often just because of the architecture there in the French Quarter, where an awning, a balcony, hangs over. It's a place where, in a rainstorm, many people would gather under. These structures have been historically taxed, or had leases attached to them, where you have to lease the air rights through the city. The enforcement has been spotty at best. My husband, who's been in real estate for decades here, said over the last decade he's heard about it, but it's not all the time. It seems hit or miss. The city government has, as of 2015, really started enforcing it. And it got enforced when people went to the city to apply for a permit for construction, either new construction or revamping. For instance, Ralph Brennan wanted to do some work on the Napoleon House downtown, or in the quarter, and he's been holding off on those repairs because he was told, you're going to owe the city $5,000 in an air rights lease, and that lease, that's an annual renewal, and it can go up to 10% every 5 years.
So
and
it's
keep
more
going,
money.
and more money, and more
yeah.
money. The Vieux-Carré Citizens, Property Owners, Residents, and Associates group was the most vocal group that attended the City Government Affairs Committee meeting last Friday and said, wait a minute, where is this even written down? How do we know who's enforced against, who isn't it? And the city came back with, it's part of the state constitution. We're not allowed to give away something of value for free. We are required under the state constitution to charge this lease fee. But it's not in writing anywhere. The enforcement has been spotty. The Vieux-Carré Citizens and Property Owners folks say they've called Lake Charles, Baton Rouge, Alexandria. Can't find another municipality in the state that's enforcing it and seeing the state constitution the same way. So in what appears to be a victory for property owners, at least in the short term, the city put a 30-day waiting period on any of these new leases. They suspended it for now. They're doing a 30-day review that's being conducted by CAO Jeff Hebert, who's deputy mayor. And 30 days from last Friday, they will announce their decision and how it will be enforced. The city would not give me any information on where they stand, how it's historically been enforced, where this is coming from. Opponents say this sure looks like a money grab, and the best guess scenario is it might bring $1 million into the city a year. But they say you've got people like Ralph Brennan who aren't going to. What does he do? His building exists with awnings. He can't fix because he's going to owe this money. He can't take down because he's part of a historic property, and it leaves him really in a catch-22 with the city. So, you know, they also say these structures actually provide a benefit to people visiting our city. Shade from sun, protection from a rainstorm.
Right, exactly.
If you're, you know, when you're scurrying around the French Quarter, especially in a rainstorm, everybody ducks under balconies and awnings.
Well, have they been collecting these monies?
They have been collecting these monies, but not from everybody and not all the time. So the question is, why has it been so spotty? Why is it now all of a sudden a thing? And will it be enforced across the board? Or will it just be scrapped?
Between new development and historic? And
his best guess, because nobody seems to be able to answer this question, is it's come up most often in new development. That's a time when you can actually see what they're talking about. Right. Not, I want to fix my balcony, and I need a city permit to fix my balcony, and all of a sudden, besides that permit, I've got to pay a $5,000 lease fee I didn't even know I had to pay.
So this needs to be spelled out a bit more.
Yes, and hopefully it will. But that's anybody's guess. It's a 30-day review period.
Okay. All right, we're going to go over to Errol now. Thanks, Don, and talk about a historic structure that had been the Carrollton Courthouse. And we've known it in other forms over the course of the centuries, certainly over the decades.
I think for as long as the Carrollton Courthouse has existed, we've never had a discussion about air rights. So this is the first. The Carrollton Courthouse was built in 1855. The distinguished architect Henry Howard built it. There it is, right there. A lot of people might remember this as the site of what to them was the original Ben Franklin High School on Carrollton Avenue. It is the second most significant landmark along that part of town. The most significant is across the street and down the block. That'd be the Camellia Grill, which a lot of people know. But anyway, the school board has owned the property, and so it went up to auction yesterday, and for $4.7 million, a company out of Houston bought it. That right there makes people nervous because the words Houston and preservation are not often used in the same sentence. But these people say, oh yeah, we're going to do all the right things. The Colonial Oaks Senior Living Group, and they've been doing things around the state. They've done something in Lafayette, and they've been looking in New Orleans, and they said they can build a really nice facility and maintain the integrity of that building. There were a lot of people with different ideas. This is not a bad idea. I mean, it's not like this is a violent crowd that's coming in, and if they do, if they do something with integrity in terms of the structure, and it could be people that'll spend money. So it may not be bad. I think what people seem to fear the most is that it'd be some kind of a big condo development, and some people say, well, isn't this the same thing as a condo except a little bit older?
Have there been any drawings or anything on what they're going to do with the property? Do we know?
Yes,
are they going to add to it?
Yes,
any other
yeah, they could definitely have to add to it because they can't do it all in that little building. I mean, you had a big campus that when it was the high school that they had some other buildings that they added. So they're going to develop the whole property. What's interesting about this historically is there was a time when it was common where you had a city. The city was sort of like the middle city, and you had smaller cities that developed around it, like New York's and the original small towns that developed around it that became ultimately the boroughs that were incorporated into the city. Well, the same thing with New Orleans. We had the town of Carrollton. Carrollton had a mayor. They had the town of Jefferson and the town of Lafayette. And gradually they were all incorporated either in the Jefferson Parish in New Orleans, and at times, cities could do that. They could go to the neighbor and says, we want you, we want to take you in. Or sometimes people wanted to go because the city had the better services. It had electricity and sewage. But in 1847 or 1874, Carrollton was incorporated into part of New Orleans. And during that time, one thing that connected the area was that they built a railroad that went along Carrollton and into New Orleans, and that is the forerunner of the streetcar track that we know it, which is, depending how you count it, some said the oldest railroad line in the country. So it's a very historic area, but what's interesting is what's happening in the new, because this site's been dormant for years, and it's a pretty area. It's a nice area with a lot of potential.
And it's a beautiful building, just the original building.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, we'll see what happens there. Thanks, Errol. Over to Jeff. You had a piece about some changing population numbers, and not as many people from out of state and counties, out of parishes and states moving into Orleans as we had for a while post Katrina.
Yeah, as everyone probably knows or thinks, since Katrina, New Orleans has had absolutely huge numbers of people moving in from elsewhere in the country. Thousands and thousands more were moving in over the last, every year over the last decade or so than we're moving out to other places. So there was new census data released this week. And for the first time since the storm, New Orleans is now actually losing people to other areas. And this,
Out-of-state areas?
Out-of-state areas, correct. This is, the numbers deal with all population, but we were focusing specifically on people moving within the United States, either into or out of New Orleans. Now,
And so how accurate is the census data?
Well, there's a lot of caveats. This is a yearly estimate that the census puts out. They try and do their best, and often these numbers are pretty good, but they're not as accurate as the head count that happens every 10 years. They're focusing on things like IRS data and Medicare data, which can leave out a lot of people. It can leave out undocumented workers. It can leave out younger people who may not change their address when they file their taxes. It can leave out low-income people who may not make enough to have to file a federal tax return. So we don't know for sure, and we really won't know for another 4 years really, when the 2020 census comes out, how accurate these are, but it does point to a potentially concerning trend for the city where, as it was before Katrina, more people are looking to leave than are coming in.
Where's the population versus pre-Katrina? Are we back to where we were even at Katrina?
We're at about 81% of the pre-Katrina population, and it's worth noting that the city is, despite the fact that more people are moving out, the city is still growing, and that's due largely to the fact that the number of people being born within the city is larger than the number of people who are dying, and the number of people who are moving in from other countries is higher than the people that are leaving for other countries.
And that's something that you saw definitely happening in Jefferson Parish.
Oh yeah. Jefferson has been having trouble for a while with people moving out of the parish to other parishes, but has had very, very strong international immigration for a long time. About 15,000 to 16,000 people a year come in from other countries.
So looking at the metro area, I mean, overall, are we sort of static? Are we growing? Or what are we doing?
We're growing slowly. The whole metro area right now is at about 1.2 million people. It's increasing by fractions of a percentage point each year. Tammany's really sort of leading the growth on that. They've got continue to have very strong growth in sort of all respects, and that really matches. Metro area matches the state as well. The state's now at about 4.7 million people, and it's growing, but it's growing slowly, and it's losing people to other states.
Okay,
but even within the city where you have people, you're seeing some redistribution of population. A prime area is in like the warehouse district, and in those areas where you're seeing population growth there. But I suspect you're seeing a major decline in eastern New Orleans.
I'd suspect as well. Unfortunately, when you get that detailed, you need the 10-year census numbers to really dig in.
So this just sort of gives us an overall picture to determine if we are seeing trends start.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. Let me go over to Tyler right now. Thanks a lot, Jeff. And one of the other major things that's going to be coming up in this legislative session is prison reform, in trying to reduce the incarceration rate here in the state, which is the highest in the country.
Well, some people believe it's the highest in the world. Yeah. Louisiana, the incarceration rate is about twice the national average, and it's been going up in recent years, although it's tapered a little bit in the last couple of years, even as crime has been going down. And we're seeing an interesting development in Marcia where both the left and the right are coming together. You have Lobby, the powerful business group, the Family Forum, a conservative Christian group, joining up with people on the left to say, we need to do something about this, again, the highest in the country. And a lot of states, including Lock 'em Up, Texas, have been going in this direction. And the issue is particularly, it was what are called the non-violent offenders, particularly people who are arrested for drugs for one reason or the other. Louisiana's policies have traditionally been, in the last generation, is to lock them up. And the experts are saying that Louisiana locks up too many of these people, that not only can the state save money by locking up fewer of them, but actually maybe even make the state safer. And so this a task force has come up with a series of recommendations, and they say from their recommendations, the state would save about $300 million and about 16% reduction in the number of people who are imprisoned. And then this task force's recommendations are to take about half of the savings and reinvest it, because the recidivism rate is so high in Louisiana. So many people who get out of prison go back in. So more programs for retraining, education, preparing people for the workforce, more people who work in probation, all those sorts of things. So this is going to be a big issue before the legislature when they reconvene on April 10.
One stat that jumped out at me, what I saw in an article was in 2015, 81% of people in Louisiana prisons were nonviolent offenders. So that definitely shows that we have a very, very large number of nonviolent offenders, and that's a focus of this task force to reduce that number. But we have to move all of these recommendations into legislation. How easy is this going to be?
Well, that's the interesting development where the left and the right are coming together. The right particularly is saying they're concerned about the cost, and the Christian leaders on the right are also saying that this is not a moral practice. People on the left are saying, yeah, this is not a good policy. So the chance of this is actually happening are pretty good because these different forces are coming together in a different way. That you remember in the 2015 governor's race, John Bel Edwards talked about moving in this direction, was attacked savagely by David Vitter with a TV ad. But now, really, the states seem to kind of move past that point, and I think there's a real chance for this to happen.
Okay, so there was a point that I just wanted to bring out, and it just slipped my mind.
Well, the interesting thing is states like Texas have done this, conservative neighboring states.
Well, I wanted to get to the opposition to it, though, because there are some points in the task force. There were 21 recommendations that were unanimously approved. The remainder had some opposition, including from the DA's Association, because some of it is dealing with violent offenders who are older, who've been in prison for quite a while. Perhaps let them go, release them from prison.
Yeah, and I remember years ago going to Angola, and in fact, I wrote a story about trying to do that. There were so many of these old men who committed just terrible crimes who were in prison, who can barely walk, and they might even be in wheelchairs, and the state would save a lot of money by releasing them, because the state right now pays for their medical care, and if they were out, the federal government would. But obviously it's a very touchy subject for the family's victims.
A big issue.
And
That was also before the legislature.
They might not have anybody to take care of them either.
Right,
So.
okay, we need to move to looking ahead right now.
Okay. Well, I have trumps anything you all have. Okay. If you recall, when our minor league team changed its name from the Zephyrs to the Baby Cakes, there was concern about what happens to Boudreaux, the nutria, and Clotilde, his wife. Well, on this website, the Baby Cakes have announced that they've maintained the services of Boudreaux, and so there will be Boudreaux and Clotilde now wearing Baby Cakes jerseys, and that will begin April 6th when the Baby Cakes begin their season.
That was very important. I was wondering about that, Tyler.
Yeah, I can't match that. So the book that I wrote with Jeremy Alford, who's often on the show, we're going to be at the Tennessee Williams Festival, which is already going on. We're going to be on a panel tomorrow it's at 10 a.m. To talk about our book Long Shot, which is the behind-the-scenes story of the 2015 governor's race.
Okay, terrific. Dawn, quick.
All right, the suspension for the air rights leases expires April 17th, so if you want to go get a permit to do your work, get it now, because you have till April 17th.
Okay, Jeff?
Short-term rental regulations go into effect for New Orleans on April 1st, so that's coming up, and we're currently tracking all the applications on our website, so check that out.
All right, thanks guys for being here. Thank you all for joining us. We want to see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
The firm of